Since in my last video I outlined why I thought that the acts of burning Qur'ans and drawing unflattering images of Muhammad were not only ineffective in promoting free speech and secular ideals in Muslim countries, but actually counterproductive, I thought I should actually offer an alternative proposal as to how we should proceed in defeating Islamic extremism. I will say this, and that is that it will be a difficult and extended struggle, but I do think that our ultimate triumph is largely inevitable, largely because we have a superior system of ideals and values relative to the Islamic extremists. So to emphasize this, I want to say that to win, we have to have confidence in our system, and not that it will triumph by force of arms or by the degradation of its opponents, but that it will be embraced as a preferred way of living by people who have the opportunity to experience its benefits firsthand. For lack of another name, I call this approach the reverse caliphate, and it's a reference to the somewhat the fear-mongering that exists now, that sees existing Muslim immigrant communities in the West as a beachhead for an emerging Islamic political dominion here. I don't think that that's actually what's going to happen. I think that, in fact, the opposite is going to happen, and that is that Islamic communities here, if they become fully integrated politically and culturally within our society, will have severe influence, or a very stark influence on their culture, the cultures from which they originated, and that they will eventually turn the tide with regard to the emergence of secular liberal democracies in those cultures. And I want to emphasize that I think the greatest fear of Islamic extremists is not that we burn their Qur'ans or desecrate images of their prophet. My guess is that although they find these acts repugnant, they see them in some respects as reassuring, confirming the depravity of our culture. Their greatest fear is their sons and daughters and brothers and sisters and neighbors and friends will return from their sojourns in the West, whether for purposes of attending university or pursuing economic advancement, with a newfound love of the advantages of living in a secular society. We really already know how we're going to win this battle, and we really need to leverage off the advantages that we have in doing so. I think there are a few points I'd like to make as a proposal. These are not exhaustive, but I think they're important things to keep in mind. And some of them I think will resonate well with people who actually oppose me with regard to my position about Quran burning and drawing Muhammad. The first element of my proposal is that the Western countries need to make sure that the process of naturalization, becoming citizens, that is, for long-term residents, is straightforward. This is really important because participation in the political system allows immigrants to become invested in the outcomes of political process. The United States has done actually relatively well in this regard because by accident history has relatively straightforward naturalization procedures. And what happens here, with important exceptions, but largely what happens here is that immigrant communities basically are electing people to the House of Representatives in a generation, and they become fully functioning participants in the political process. So the first point is really to make sure that naturalization is straightforward. The second point is to move toward a common secular curriculum as part of all primary and secondary education. This is a real challenge. It'll be a real challenge in the U.S. I think it'll be less of a challenge actually in European countries. The important thing here is that everybody needs to be on the same page, literally, with regard to the secular values and civic obligations of the society in which they live, and the process by which we do this type of inculcation is through primary and secondary education. I have no hope that religious schools will be outlawed or eliminated. I don't think that that's in the cards, but I do think that they should be relegated to roles having to do with specifically with religious training. So the idea here is that common secular curriculum is an important part in making sure that everyone agrees upon the foundations of secular society. The third point that I want to make, and that is that we all have to be tolerant of private and public expressions of religious observance, and scrupulously even-handed in determining where places of worship can be located. This idea of outlawing mosques or minarets is just insane, and this isn't as a result of some politically correct stance about having to indulge people who have bad ideas. It's just the idea that tolerance breeds tolerance, and to the extent that we want to influence people and encourage them to become tolerant, then we need to be tolerant ourselves. So that's the third point, to be tolerant of religious expression. The fourth point, and this is where I probably find common cause with a lot of the people who I disagree with in other regards, and that is that I think we need to resist and reverse the establishment of separate religious courts and legal processes. To me, the idea of this balkanization of the justice system is an anathema to a secular state. It also creates opportunities creates opportunities for forces in place to prevent people from participating more broadly in the culture by not giving them avenues of dispute resolution or whatever that are available in the surrounding culture. So I think it's really important that we have to resist establishment of separate religious judicial systems of any type. And the final point that I want to make in terms of my reverse caliphate proposal, and that is that we actually need to encourage and expand cultural and educational exchange in all possible ways. And we've already seen how important university education has been in terms of planting seeds for liberal ideas in Islamic countries. But I do want to emphasize that the expansion of cultural and educational exchange really needs to include personal friendships. And I think that's something that we can all participate in. So that's my 5-point program: straightforward naturalization process, common secular curriculum, tolerance of public and private religious expression, resisting the establishment of religious courts, and the expansion of personal and more general cultural and educational exchanges. It's not comprehensive. It's the points that came to mind for purposes of this video. I'm not going to say that this is going to be quick or easy. The reason that we have the opportunity to win has to do with globalization, globalization of ideas, of economics, of communications technologies. The challenge and the reason we have to work really hard, and that is the globalization process is massively disruptive, and so there's a lot of pushback, and it has to be a process that's managed properly. I want to make an argument as to why I think this is effective, and largely I think it's effective because it's working already, and that is the seeds of the democratic awakening taking root in Cairo and Benghazi and Damascus and Sana'a and Tehran were germinated in the West, many in Western universities. We are reaping a crop of secular education that was sown 40 years ago in some regards. And so this is really an indication that we are on the right track, although we don't have anybody on the run quite yet. I want to close by saying this and to emphasize it. I think this is probably where I'll get some disagreement, but the way I see it, our job is not to defeat Islam, but our job is to nurture emerging liberal democratic traditions within Islamic cultures. This is actually what's happening. It will take time. By focusing on the defeat of Islam, we create an unnecessary goal, and one that we're not likely to accomplish anytime soon, if ever. In fact, we may encourage the opposite effect of what we want to obtain. But I do think that we can nurture emerging liberal democratic traditions within Islamic culture. I think this is happening. I think people who claim that this is an impossibility are mistaken, because we're actually witnessing it, although it's far from concluded. So I'm going to close by saying I am confident that our secular, liberal, democratic society will emerge victorious in the battle with Islamic extremism, not because it is in some abstract way a superior system, although I believe it is a superior system, but because when people are given the opportunity to experience its benefits firsthand, they embrace it willingly. I will end by saying that in this regard, I think we are all in this together. We do understand why our system is preferred and why other people will flock to it given the opportunity to experience its benefits. Thank you very much for your time.